Good afternoon and welcome to the NCFCA Online Summit. My name is Amy Joy Tofty and it is my pleasure to serve as the Director of Education for NCFCA. Since 2001, NCFCA has empowered Christian students to apply and communicate their worldview with skill and clarity. Through regional and national competitions, supported by robust training and curriculum, tens of thousands of students have demonstrated confidence and excellence in communicating with grace. To meet your challenge, visit www.ncfca.org. So we're so grateful that you're joining us for our free online summit. This one-week workshop will lay a firm foundation for a variety of speech and debate events. Today, you'll enjoy 30 minutes of live teaching, followed by 2 fantastic giveaways. We have some great books and swag from our friends at Clemson University, and another full scholarship worth $499 to the Forge Leadership Summit. And then we'll finish up our time together with the live question and answer session. This week lays a firm foundation. If you're ready to take the next step and you want to build on that foundation, then register for the NCFCA Online Intensive, which takes place August 3rd through the 7th. This will host interactive sessions, virtual breakout room activities, and you'll receive instant feedback from coaches. At the end of the intensive, you'll leave with a step-by-step plan that you can implement to prepare and present a great speech for any occasion. So if you would like to register today, visit ncfca.org/intensive. Now, to get the most out of each session, we do want you to fully focus on the speaker. And so for that intent, we will pause the chat box while the speaker is sharing. If you have specific questions about NCFCA competition or resources, join us tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. and we're going to answer those questions and share with you some of our heart behind the mission of NCFCA. If you have technical difficulties, you are welcome to reach out to summittech@ncfca.org and we'll help you as quickly as possible. And if you have questions about the specific material being presented in this session, please submit those questions by clicking on the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll answer as many of the questions as possible at the end of the session. In Titus chapter 2, we read, "Show yourselves in all respects to be a model of good works, and in your teaching show integrity, dignity, and sound speech that cannot be condemned." Today in session 6, Preparing for Extemporaneous, you'll learn how to contribute to a research team, to research current events, domestic and foreign policies, and then to use your in-round preparation time strategically. Your instructor is Melanie Corley. Melanie is a lawyer, a business owner, and a Region 11 NCFCA parent of 5 children who have all competed in Region 11. Mrs. Corley has coached value debate, policy debate, and moot court over the past 12 seasons, and she currently serves on the NCFCA debate committee. So welcome, Melanie.
Hi, thank you. I've also served on the Extemp team, the league's Extemp team, for the past 4 seasons. And so they asked me to conduct the Extemp limited prep session for the summit. And it is an honor, and I'm super excited to get to do that. So let's jump right in and ask the question, why Extemp? Which is actually the wrong question. The better question is, why in the world not Extemp? There is not a better event. To me, this Extemp is the pinnacle of all of the skills that speech and debate help us all acquire. It is the culmination of entertaining with and informing and persuading, using debate skills and speech skills and critical thinking skills, and part of the reason why we want to learn about current events and especially global events is so that we can truly address the world's issues in a manner that glorifies God, according to a biblical worldview. So I have 2 examples as to how Extemp has helped me accomplish those goals. And so I just want to share real quick. I brought my son to the Texas DMV to get his learner's permit, which is literally a 3-hour wait period. And I'm sitting next to a lady, and she had an accent. So I asked her where her accent is from, and she said Venezuela. And so for 3 hours, I asked her questions about Venezuela, about her family there, about the surrounding countries and how they have aided or harmed the crisis that's going on there. And at one point in the conversation, she looked at me and she said, Americans know nothing about what's going on in Venezuela. How do you know so much? And I said, oh, I just volunteer. But it is such a simple way to demonstrate that I care about her, that I love her because of Jesus, just by knowing something about where she comes from. A second example of why this event is so impactful and meaningful is that the kids of mine that have gone to college, speech and debate sets young people apart anyway, but Extemp makes it even more. And so both of my kids who have gone to college, Extemp was a critical part in their application process and their interviews. And it made an impact in that process for both of my kids that are in college. So my goals for this session are, one, if you don't already compete in this event, to persuade you to compete in this, the best event ever, and to give tools to a new extemporer to make it not so daunting or intimidating if you might be intimidated by the event. And also, if there are experienced extemporers with us, to give maybe a little bit of guidance on how to analyze questions and take their analysis deeper on when they are preparing their own speeches. So could you guys let me know in the chat box how long you have done Extemp? If you've never done it before, then that would be 0, or how many seasons that you've done it, 0, 1, 2, 10, whatever that is. Wow, so there are a pile of you that have never done Extemp before. Okay, great. So now the pressure's on to see if I can effectively persuade you to do this event. Okay, so let's start with the nuts and bolts of the event. Extemp, when you go to a tournament, it's just like all of the others in that there are postings, except for these postings are special and magical. And so that postings have draw times on them. And so usually, you know how it doesn't matter what the order of the speakers are. And so we want you to go to your rooms and, do your speeches and stuff. Well, in Extemp, that is not the case. You must go in the order that you are prescribed. And there is a draw time that is there to tell you what time that is. And so you go to the Extemp prep room before your time, because if you're not 5 minutes early, you're late. I mean, that's just in life, not for the event. There's actually no rule that you're there before. But anyway, so you go, you stay outside the room. When it's your draw time, you go in, you have 20 minutes of prep time to prepare for a maximum of 7-minute speech. In the prep room, you can bring a laptop or electronic device, a 3x5 note card, and once you go into the prep room, you draw a topic card. And it is also magical. It has your name on it, and it has 2 topics, and you pick from the topics. In the prep room, there is no internet connection, no plugging in for your devices. So you want to have done research in preparation of the tournament. And so you download, people use Extemp software, and there's 2 main softwares, Prepped and Extemp Genie. And never the two shall meet. There is a ongoing hot debate about Prep versus Extemp Genie. I actually don't know anything about that, so I can safely stay on the sidelines of that debate. Our team that we've participated on has always used Prepped, so I know a little bit about it, not a lot, but anyway. So there's software that helps you. You capture articles or download articles, and that's what you have on your laptop, and that's what you can use that's what you use to draw on for your sources for your speech. There's no writing on the topic card, but you want to keep it with you because you have to state your question, just like in other limited prep events. You are very fancy. You are escorted to your speech room where you then deliver your speech. In your speech, you need to hold your prep card. Your prep card is used to accurately cite your source and quote sources that you use for your speech. We aim to have 1 to 3 sources per point, and you cite your source like you would in a debate round, where you state the publication and the date. And then you also want to make sure, like I said earlier, to state your question in your introduction. So from the brief introduction, for those of you who have never done it before, can you let me know what part of Extemp you think would be the most challenging? Can you not get to your room on time? Can you not keep your laptop charged? Those kinds of things. So you can let me know that in the chat box. So let's talk next about answering a question. So there is a vast difference between new extempers and experienced extempers. So the goal for a new extemper is, how much of my 7 minutes can I take up? And can I survive the next 7 minutes? And can I do that without passing out? So I'm just joking, nobody has ever passed out in an extemp round. But then experienced extempers, their objective is, which speech structure maximizes the impact for my audience? Which question can highlight my supreme knowledge about global events? How can I engage my audience most effectively? Can I use humor in this speech? So once you have a foundational knowledge, then your goals are a little bit different. But when you are new, definitely the goal is, how close can I get to 7 minutes? And that's great. That's a great thing about this event, right? Because the longer you do it, the events change slowly. So we are still talking about the Syrian civil war, and we have been doing that for 11 of my 12 years in the league. So the longer you do it, the more base knowledge you have, and you flesh out your understanding. So their Extemp speeches are designed, like I said, the pinnacle of all of the events together. So they inform, they persuade, they entertain, because a lot of times you're talking to people who either don't know what you're talking about or do not care. And so you want to inspire them to care about these events, about current events. And so you have your two topics, right? And you're faced with two questions. So what do you do? Which question do you choose? When you're new, you look at the topics and you might immediately go to your Extemp software, type it in to see if you have any resources on either one of the topics. And whichever one you have the most stuff on, that topic wins. But you can ask, okay, do I know anything at all about topic 1? Yes or no? Do I know anything about topic 2? Yes or no? And if I know nothing about either one, then you're going to use 20 minutes to educate yourself as much as you can about a very complex topic in 20 minutes or less, and you do your best. And then if you know everything about both, then you go through the analysis of which topic enlightens my audience the most, which one can I do the better job on. So managing prep time, literally when you draw your topic, between drawing your topic, seeing what research you have available to you, and making that choice is less than 1 minute. And so then you want to spend, so you have 20 minutes of prep time. You want to spend less than 1 minute identifying your topic, and about 15 minutes researching, putting together your prep card. And then the last 4 minutes you're going to go through your outline. It's not going to be a full 7 minutes, but you want to run through your outline to see, just to know how you want your delivery to go. So what type of topics do we do in the NCFCA? The NCFCA, we have the approach that we want for everybody to be informed, right, on all the issues. So we cover domestic topics that are US based, we cover international topics, and we cover economic and business topics. In a traditional tournament, there are 3 preliminary rounds, and oftentimes that gets broken up. The prelim rounds are a domestic round, an international round, and a business economic round. And then elimination rounds are a mixture of whatever, of all of those. So in domestic type issues, those are US domestic policy, US foreign policy, criminal justice issues, social issues, cultural issues, education, housing, healthcare, labor unions, and Supreme Court decisions that are important going on in the news. International topics that are addressed. Essentially, if you think of the globe basically broken down into regions, continents, the questions come from basically like Africa as a section, Asia, Latin America, Europe, the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa as a region, and think major issues. So we are not talking about, crime statistics in a neighborhood in the Sudan. We are talking about major issues. The goal, educational value of the event. So we want you to understand the broad issues that impact the United States, and just the world around us. So that's international politics, humanitarian crises, wars, conflicts. Some sample major issues could be the South China Sea, Hong Kong protests, the Yellow Vester protests in France last year, Uyghurs in China, the India-Pakistan conflict, Israel-Palestinian conflict, civil wars in Yemen and Syria, the Sahel region in Africa. So major issues, major global issues. The things that we touch on in economics or business topics are the Fed, company specific topics. So if there's, like Google is always in the news, Facebook, Amazon, Uber, Wells Fargo, defrauding a bunch of their customers, because I'm a Wells Fargo customer, I can attest, they hate all of their customers. Technology and civil rights in tech, oil and gas industry, travel industry, housing industry, stock markets, international economic issues cover the Eurozone, China's Belt and Road, Brexit, international bodies like the WTF, the IMF or the World Bank. Those are all different subtopics in the business or economic category. So if y'all can let me know, which of these categories do you think would be the best, the most fun to learn about? I really don't have a favorite at this point. I love it all. So let me know what you think would be the most challenging. And all of them, come on. So how about this? Is there, I'll ask that question in a little bit. So let's talk about how to approach an Extemp question. Extemp questions basically are asking you to do one of three things. They are asking you to evaluate a certain situation. They are asking you to predict an outcome or to prescribe a solution. So when you read a question, it's basically asking you to do one of those three things: evaluate, predict, or advise or prescribe. So the first thing, when you read a question, you want to understand what it is asking you. So the first thing you want to ask yourself is, why is this question being asked? The question is being asked, I can tell you the basic answer is the question is being asked because this topic has been in the news in the last 90 days. So all of the Extemp questions come from the news in the last 90 days. And again, I can't stress this enough. We are looking for page 1 topics, not page 21 of the living section. So we want you guys to really love and understand current events. So we want the event to be fun, and it is fun when you are asked a question that you're like, hey, I know about that. And so that is the goal. So then you want to find out, what is this question asking? There are basically open questions, the how, why, what type of questions, and those are open, right? So there's not a specific answer. And then there are closed questions that basically are asking you a yes or no. Okay, so those would be, is, should, does, can. They're asking, the answer is a yes because, or no because. And there are broad and narrow questions. So broad questions are like, is something an overreaction? Is something too much? That is broad in that it is not giving you a specific narrow focus. Okay, so broad questions aren't bad. I see some of your texts are, not knowing specifically how to answer. So broad questions are easier in that they give you a lot of latitude. If you have knowledge, you can tailor or define that question to be in accordance with the knowledge that you have. But it's difficult in that it's like you are painting your own picture. So you have to define how you want to answer the question, in what way, and then crafting your thesis helps you narrow that focus, narrow your own focus. So, and then narrow questions are asking specific, pretty specific things. And so like one of my questions that I wrote for this, just jotted down, was like an example of a broadly worded question. Can Hong Kong's autonomy survive? Okay, that's pretty broad. Narrow question, does Coinbase's response to the Twitter hack boost Bitcoin's legitimacy? So there's a lot of keywords in there, they're linked together. So that is a narrow focus, and then in contrast to a broad focus. So I can also tell you that we tend towards asking broad questions in order to give students a lot of leeway in how they answer the questions. It's not to be difficult, it is to highlight the knowledge that you have in your skills. Meet you where you're at, right? The goal is for you guys to succeed and do your very best. And so that's not to say that narrow questions are bad, it's just that we tend toward broad questions. And remember, evaluate, prescribe, or predict. Every question is going to ask you to do one of those things. And so once you are crafting, once you know what the question is, your answer is contained in your thesis statement. So you're crafting a thesis statement, and that is 1, the answer to your question, and 2, the reasons that support that answer. So know this, there are no wrong answers, right? So there is not a wrong answer, and it all goes to how well you support your answer. It's very similar to crafting an impromptu debate case. So you are stating a thesis, you are supporting a particular claim with your reasons. So the thesis, when you craft a thesis, the thesis is going to give your answer to the question and a preview of the arguments that you're going to make to prove your answer, right? Once you define your own thesis, then that helps you. If you know too much, then that helps you narrow what you are going to include in your answer. And if you don't know anything at all, then that thesis is like, okay, what do I know? In my 20 minutes, I can learn about these 3 things or these 2 things, and that becomes, your thesis. So it helps define what you know. And then, so let's take real quick, let's go through just a couple of sample Extemp questions. I just jotted these down. So, so how about this? Can y'all tell me in the chat, can you tell me something that you have seen in the news, seen or heard in the news? So anything at all, foreign, domestic. Oh, really, there's coronavirus in there. Is coronavirus going on? Is that a thing? So notably, that's something else to note, is that you could have, like coronavirus is all in the news. It's like the only thing that's been in the news since March. So, so you won't want to have a round where the only questions are coronavirus related, but it's likely that you will see 1 or 2 questions that involve coronavirus, but you won't want a whole round, because what judge wants to listen to 8 speakers talking about the coronavirus? But I see a lot of chats that are about the riots. Okay, so my first question that I jotted down is sending federal troops to quell US protests an overreaction. So here's the question. Students, here is your question. Is sending federal troops to quell US protests an overreaction? So let me know in the chat, let me know if this is an open question or a closed question. So is this open, or does it have a yes, no answer? Okay, So is sending federal troops to quell U.S. protests an overreaction? Okay, so right, it is asking for, is this an overreaction, yes or no? So that makes it a closed question. Great job. See, y'all, even though you're new, you are going to kill this event. It is simple. So yes, you already got the first one right. So actually, let me ask you, I'm gonna put up my little slide here that has the analysis questions for how we approach a question, okay? So why is this question being asked, right? So do we know that this is in the news? I just asked you guys and a bunch of you said, yes, there's riots in the news. So yes. Why is the question being asked? Because there are riots in the United States and federal troops were sent to Portland. So we know why it's being asked, right? Now, what is the question asking? Open or closed? Y'all killed it on that one. Congratulations. Is this broad or narrow? So can you give me your opinion on, is this broad or narrow? Is sending federal troops to quell U.S. protests an overreaction? Is this a broad or a narrow question? So I would classify this as a broad question because it's asking, is this an overreaction, right? Well, is this an overreaction according to whose perspective, right? So you get to define the perspective that you're answering the question from. And so you get to choose all of that. So that means that this is pretty broad. You get to choose. Is this asking, our next question in our analysis, is this asking for an evaluation, a prediction, or advising a solution? So let me know in your chat, is this an evaluation, a prediction, or a solution? I am going to say that for me, I believe that, oh, something else notable. Essentially, all questions, if you say evaluation, you're pretty much always going to be right because the baseline, right? The baseline is always evaluation. And then on top of that, you predict an outcome, or on top of your evaluation, you can advise a solution. So this question, pretty basic, closed question, broad in its scope, and is asking for an evaluation, right? So what are the key words? So what is the question asking? Tell me in the chat. Basically, what do you think? Is it overreaction? Is it federal troops? What is the main thing, or is it protests? What is the main thing this question is asking? Okay, so then y'all are killing it. So even all of you new people, you are born extempers. So then you ask yourself, okay, how am I going to answer? Let's just say I want to say, yes, this is an overreaction. Sending federal troops is an overreaction. Okay, so then why? Why is this an overreaction? Well, what are some reasons out there? That mayors did not want you to come. That state governors did not invite you. There's the presence of the federal troops, federal agents has increased violence, not decreased violence. So all of these are reasons why this would be an overreaction. Well, what if I want to say that the answer is no, it's not an overreaction? What would my reasons be for that? So maybe toss me up in the chat. What are some reasons why this would not be an overreaction? Does anybody know? Some of the reasons that I just jotted down right before we started was protesters attacked federal buildings. So if it's my house, I get to defend it, right? So it's not an overreaction because protesters were attacking the federal property. There's 61 consecutive days of protests. So somebody is not doing a good job of restoring law and order. So that's another reason why. And I have an insurrection act that supports the legality of my approach here. So those are reasons for both sides, for a yes answer and a no answer. So, and you just get to pick. So you get to pick how you want to answer the question, and then you craft your thesis. So a thesis statement that I wrote: no, sending federal troops to quell U.S. protests is not an overreaction because protesters are attacking federal property, U.S. citizens' safety is being threatened, and the action is legal under this Insurrection Act. So then I'm going to use my prep time to gather up some sources to support each one of those of my reasons. and then I'm going to present my speech, right? Piece of cake. So, and then your speech structures, much like the impromptu or apologetic, any other kind of limited prep or informative speech, you have, multiple structures that you can use to structure your speech. You want your thesis to reflect that, but those are some basic structures, but you can do it however you want. You can have 2 points, and you can have 3 points, you can have 4 points, however you want to structure your speech. So then, this is a lot to cover in a 30 minutes time. So just want to cover some complaints that extempors have. A lot of you guys, said that it's intimidating. So from intimidating about international topics and economic and business topics. So Extemp is definitely like, it's what's great about it and what's a drawback about it is that a lot of times you cannot just jump in and be great at Extemp because there's a lot to learn. So it's great to have a team of people who are contributing to pooling research, but I know a lot of people say they don't need a team because Extemp Genie does it all for them. And so some common complaints that I get from extempers are you can't show up to the draw time on time because you're too busy talking to your friends. Well, okay, so that's just maturity. You just want to be responsible and keep up with your time. Computer failures. Okay, I have had students that will come into a room and say, my computer failed, so I can't answer this question. And that is absolutely not the case. You can support, there is common knowledge out there. You can, if you just bring a single, Economist magazine, you can find something on your topic. And you have knowledge, so you can use that as your support. But one of the common complaints is that they don't have enough base knowledge. So that is just a function of learning and being in the news all the time, which is fun. It's like a sport. It's a challenge. It's like eating a big giant plate of food. You got to get to the very end. A lot of times people mismanage their time in speaking. So they spend too much time on their intro, too much time on background. And the other common complaints I hear is that the questions are bad. Well, it is a poor craftsman that blames his tools. Isn't that right? So if you think about this, the question is what you make it. So you can take the knowledge that you have and apply that to interpreting the question in a way that maximizes your knowledge. So don't blame the questions. Use the questions to think to yourself, how can I best marry the question with my knowledge and skills and kill this event? So my favorite resource before I end, I want to say my favorite, if you don't know anything at all, especially about international news, my favorite resource is from the Council on Foreign Affairs, and it is called Backgrounders. And it has material on every major international issue. And it is a very central source, and it is the best educational tool. So you can do this event. You can learn all about the different issues. It does not take that much time. And you can become informed global citizen. You can demonstrate Jesus' love to people by knowing what they are experiencing. And it is a habit. Extemp is a habit. During the tournament season, I exercise and I'm listening to podcasts. And then if there's something I'm like, oh, I gotta jot that down. And I stop and I type in my notes on my phone, yellow vesters in France, or, protesters in Portland. So I listen to podcasts that helps me get a general briefing on the news headlines. And I just type those into my notes, and then I can go look up those on my computer, and that's where you get your get your news articles. So so that, I think, takes me to the end of my time. And if you guys have any questions, I am happy to answer those.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Corley. So I'm going to invite our Director of Marketing, Mrs. Natalia Rosa, onto the screen, and she has some great giveaways for you all.
Yes, we do. Okay, so the giveaway for today, I'm going to share my screen so you can see an image because you all have been very curious about what these giveaways look like. The giveaway is provided by the Lyceum program at Clemson University. And so you can see here, it's a fun swag pack, a t-shirt, a book. So you can dive into a little bit of Socrates here, 4 texts from Socrates, and also a book by Ayn Rand. And the giveaway winner from this session is very suspenseful here because I have to scroll over to the right screen. Benjamin Parker is the giveaway for this session. So Benjamin Parker, if you could send us an email at summittech@ncfca.org, we'll make sure that you can claim your giveaway prize.
Excellent. Thank you. And now we're going to go through some question and answers. We've got a lot of great questions here for you, Melanie. So as you all know, the real question that everyone wants to know is what's the best app for Extemp? So I heard you say that you really don't know either of them. So there's another question about Extemp boxes. What's an Extemp box?
So in the olden days, we didn't have computers, or we did have computers, but we weren't allowed to use them. And so Extemp boxes, we literally would have a separate vehicle that came to tournaments, and it was full. Like you think a debate box is big? No, we had 10 Extemp boxes. Natalia probably remembers that. And
Yep.
we would load them up in a separate vehicle, and because we had articles that we would print out and load into domestic boxes, foreign boxes, and economic boxes, and general background boxes. And now literally all we need is a singular laptop, and it is
Unbelievable.
Yes.
And so I have experience with Prepped. I don't have any experience with Extemp Genie. I don't think that they're terribly different. So basically they each have a subscription, and you can download a feed so that you have articles to draw from. And then you also, in Prepped at least, you capture articles. And so some sources have a paywall and some sources don't.
Okay.
So you just, go to BBC and you capture articles to your software. And then when you go to a tournament, you have those at your disposal to use as sources.
That's great. Natalia, were you in the box world or the computer world?
I'm from the olden days, so I have those fond memories of carrying really heavy Extemp boxes upstairs and into vehicles and guarding them with your life to make sure that everything was filed correctly. I think at the end of the day, though, I did do some coaching and lead a little bit of a club with online. And my encouragement is, all these questions about software does not a great extemper make. So pick a tool, and at the end of the day, your research and your knowledge base that's in your head, not just what's stored on the computer, is what's going to be most important in helping you prepare.
So I'd like to comment on that too. People will always say, oh, debate requires you to think fast on your feet. Oh, lawyers think fast on their feet. And really that isn't the case. So the best lawyers are the lawyers who have prepared outside of the courtroom, right? The best debaters, the reason why they appear that they are thinking on their feet is because they have prepared outside of the competition room. If you are learning your topic in your 20 minutes of prep time, you're just not going to know as much as if you, as if you learn about it during the semester prepping.
I love the heart behind this next question. So we have some really young folks with us, and we do have a lot of novice folks who this is their very first experience with NCFCA. So how do you develop an interest or a passion for current events, for the news?
Well, that is a great question. That's like saying, how do you develop a taste for steak? Isn't it just good just by looking at it? No. So I get that. So my kids, none of them were, super jazzed about, learning about current events. And so at my house, we just bludgeon people and force them to do things anyway. But
thank you for your honesty.
No, we don't do that. So, but what I have found is that the more you know, the more it's fun. It's fun to know stuff. So when you don't know anything at all, none of the kids, of course, have been pregnant, but like when you are pregnant, you look around and you're like, oh my gosh, there are so many pregnant people. But like before that, you don't pay any attention to any pregnant people. Mm-hmm. So it's like, you don't pay attention to current events, but then once you start knowing stuff, then it's like, oh, I know something about that. Yes. Oh, I know something about that. And then you start engaging with people because you didn't even know that conversations were going on around you because you were totally tone deaf because you just didn't know. Mm-hmm. And then once you just learn a little bit, I'm telling you, everything is linked together. So it's super exciting. Like the protests in Portland, are tied to, how is that tied to coronavirus? Well, it is, right? And I mean, yes. So that you see how things, it's like a puzzle. And who doesn't love puzzles, right? So you get to see how the news interacts with each other, and it all impacts on the foreign international relations. And so the more you know, the more delicious that steak is, right? I just look at sitting on the plate, but then once you start eating it, you just want more and more and more.
That's fantastic. Natalia, you started competing.
Yeah.
How old were you when you started competing in Extemp?
I actually put Extemp off for several years. So I think I was 16 or 17 by the time I competed in Extemp. And part of that is I had a little bit of an illusion, and it was false perception, but that people who did Extemp were only the people who watched the news 24/7 and were constantly reading articles and loved to listen to talk radio all the time. And I didn't feel like I was that person. Right. But the thing about current events is it really ties to every topic of life. So if you're a young student or if you're a coach trying to inspire that interest or help your student acquire the taste for Extemp, like acquiring the taste for steak, I would encourage you to find some topic that is interesting to them. So maybe they really care about cultures and languages. Maybe they're really interested in economics or business. Maybe they really care about a certain geographical location. Start there. Mm-hmm. And as you continue to learn, you'll realize, oh, all of history, all of these different topics tie into what is happening today. And that's what helped me learn to love Extemp, because my particular point of interest was history. And so when I realized what is happening right now ties to all of history, and I can talk about those things that I love and how all of the different geographies also tie into current events, then that really got me hooked.
So we're in the middle, actually we're at the end, sadly, of summer. How would you recommend students start preparing right now? So maybe even before their local clubs start, what can they do right now?
So a couple of things. One thing that I really recommend is the economic thinking class, like that you can, I think it's just like 12 weeks worth of material. Mm-hmm. And it is not mathematical at all. Economics impacts everything. Economics impacts protests. Economics impacts coronavirus. And so, and then there's a whole, one of our whole entire categories is economics focused. So learning about economics is actually, it's a social science. So it just helps your critical thinking. And it's amazing how much that knowledge applies to just decision-making. Mm-hmm. And so I loved that class. I loved teaching that class. All the kids, loved learning. And they all talk about, even though I forced them all to do it, they all talk about stuff that they learned in there that, I have one kid that actively tries not to learn things. And he still is like, he'll still say things that he learned in that class accidentally. And so economics, because it's the basis of all decisions. Mm-hmm. And it's easy and fun. And then I think that looking up the backgrounders on CFR.org, if you just pick one a week to read and learn about, you will know more than 98% of all Americans.
That's great. Natalia, do you have any other recommendations?
Not anything specific. There are a lot of strategies. And I think if you really feel at a loss, starting with a great foundation in economics with a course from economics thinking, something like that is great. And also just figure out a routine that works for you. So how do you learn best? Is it by watching or listening or reading? Make it fun and enjoyable. That's part of building habits too. Don't try to make it extra difficult. So find the best way to learn for you and then plug that into your daily schedule.
That's great. And that particular program, you were saying how economics affects everything. It also pours over into debate. And we are blessed to have the program director for economic thinking, speaking on Thursday at the summit. So come back at 3:00 and Mr. Greg Remke is going to be talking about economics and how that affects even things in the European Union. So looking at the comparison between the United States and the European Union. So that'll be exciting. So I love this question. In Extemp, should we aim for length or quality?
I'll let the coach speak first. I think I know what she's going to say.
Okay, so always quality is good, right? And the more you get quality and length at the same time. But so it's a spectrum. And so at first it's going to be poor quality and poor length. And then it morphs over time to be, maybe good quality, shorter length. And then we keep progressing on the spectrum, and then it's great quality and great length. So quality is always, I'm in this whole activity for the educational value. So I want you to learn something that's meaningful.
That's great.
Apply to everyday life.
I was going to say yes. Speaking of open and closed-ended questions, should we aim for quality or length? Yes, you should. Okay, so I love this question. Melanie, you mentioned that you're an attorney. So do you see how this event could help somebody who is on that path, who wants to become an attorney? And if so, how?
So for one, anybody who wants to go to law school, this is my advice to everybody who wants to go to law school. Major in something that is pragmatic, not philosophy. So then you're not just worthy as a lawyer, you actually have other background knowledge. Let's see, I forget the question now.
So how can Extemp help prepare somebody for law school?
Oh, right. Extemp prepares everybody for everything they would ever want to do in their whole their life. It's the best event ever. So but how does it prepare you specifically for going into law school? Well, it helps you be a critical thinker. It helps you be an informed global citizen. It sets you apart. So it demonstrates that you are the cream of the crop. So speech and debaters are already the cream of the crop. And then extempers are the top of that cream. So when you're wanting to go into law school, you want to make yourself just like college, except for, more. You want to set yourself apart as being intelligent, thoughtful, critical thinker, engaged citizen, because they want they want lawyers who care about the world, and especially now. And so that helps all of those things.
Natalia, did you ever enter an Extemp round, where you had no articles on the topics that were on your cards? And if so, how did you walk that out?
Oh yes, especially in the days of the Extemp boxes where it's not like you could just search a bunch of articles on your computer.
Right.
And every once in a while someone would put the folder in the wrong place. So you knew the articles were in there, but you couldn't find them. I think, again, so the longer question is obviously research and preparation and how do you avoid that happening. But then the other answer is connect the question to what you do know. So hopefully you at least have some conceptual understanding of the topic, but then relate it to other topics you do have articles on. That's where I think critical thinking and logic comes into play with Extemp. So you are trying to connect. Well, if we're talking about a specific country or a couple of different countries, can I at least think about the history of those countries or the location? How does that actually impact the question at hand? And that's why I said earlier, the more that you learn history, the more you realize there's really nothing new under the sun. All of this just comes back around and recirculates and centers on the same topic. So connect to what you do know.
That's
and
great.
then go research after. That would be my tip.
Right. That is a great tip. I tell all the kids, I was like, yeah, you could have done a better job on that speech. So go home and learn about not at tournaments. That's just, in practice.
Yes, yes.
I would say to answer that question, background, how much time you spend on background can be a function of how much material you have or that you know. Mm-hmm. And so you end up might spending more time on background if you know about the history or you know about the geography. So much about, in terms of international affairs, so much is impacted by its geography. Does it have access to water? Does it have, a navy? Does it have an army? Is it a former Soviet state? And so the geography and that past politics impacts today. So if you know about that, then you just give a history lesson. And then your answer is, in your conclusion. So you do take what you know and then apply that.
Melanie, I know that you've been a coach for a lot of years. So what would you say to a student who is afraid to compete in Extemp because she doesn't want to take a side and then figure out later that it's something she really doesn't support?
Okay, that's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
Asking these questions. They are extempers. They are extempers in the making. These people are super smart. They should all do Extemp. Now I've forgotten the question again. No, just kidding. I can answer this question. So, just like debate, right? There are two sides to everything. And just because you understand and can support the side that you don't agree with, it doesn't make you hypocritical. You are formulating an answer and support for that answer. If what we learned the first time was enough, then we'd all know, kindergarten material and that's it. And we would be very uninteresting people. So the more we know, we want to change and mature and progress. And so that's great. If you change your mind, then that becomes, the foundation for the next Extemp speech, which is, when I didn't understand as much, I believed X, but now that I know more, my analysis leads me to a different conclusion because of these reasons. And all that demonstrates is maturity and learning and growth.
Love that. Natalia, any words of encouragement for those folks who are still just trying to figure out what side of issues they're on?
Just get started. It's a learning process. And guess what? You're going to be learning for the rest of your life. So I know at 13, you might feel like you especially don't hold a lot of knowledge or are not sure exactly what your position is. Or you might be on the other side of the spectrum and you think you hold all knowledge and have all the answers to all the questions. But you're going to be learning and growing for all of your life. So I think it's actually a really great exercise, like Melanie said, to think about arguments from different sides and viewpoints, and to even be able to articulate that in a really gracious way. And then to realize, oh, now that I've done a little bit more research and I can actually present on a different side of this opinion. And I'm not even contradicting myself. I might have arrived at a different conclusion, but here is the reason why. Here's the new information that I've now learned that has led me to see it a different way. So I think that's part of the great process of Extemp. Just get started and you're going to learn to love it if you don't already.
So right now, if you're brand new to this event, it can feel a little bit overwhelming because it feels like these stories that are current actually have long histories behind them. So how do you recommend somebody get started? What's a good way just to break in with a couple of topics?
So there's, like I said, there's 3 categories. So what I do is I get a tech newsletter. I get a Politico tech newsletter, and that gives me big headlines. And so I just, and it's one paragraph, a headline and a paragraph. So this is not, I am not reading a doctoral thesis. I'm reading a paragraph. And so I get a tech newsletter. I have a subscription, to a newspaper. So I can read the front page, not the 21st page. I read the front page, which doesn't take very long. and I actually listen to the PBS NewsHour every day because that gives me, if I don't have time to read, then that gives me just the headlines for what's going on domestically. And I also get a foreign newsletter. So again, I'm reading a paragraph on a topic. And so then after doing that a while, you can see what the major issues are, and there's not that many. So, and like, even though the news changes every day, the actual issue is not changing over a long period of time. So if you learn about something, if you learn about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you know that forever. And it's like that applies for the rest of the time that you're doing Extemp. So there's really not, it seems big, but it's really not. And then I get 2 newsletters, each thing with paragraphs, and then I get a newspaper.
That's great. I do want to encourage, there are a lot of questions in the chat box about event rules and what this looks like as you walk that out. I want to invite you to go to our website, www.ncfca.org. You can search for the resource library and you can find a lot of the answers to your questions in the extemporaneous rules. So take some time to read those. And then I really want to thank you, Melanie, for sharing your years of coaching experience with us, and of course your enthusiasm. That's always helpful too. So last cheer for the people to see if we can convert all of the rest of these folks into Extemp. What would you say to them?
I would say just do it. There is zero downside. There's only an upside. So practice makes progress. And so no matter what amount of effort you put in, you will get a return. You will get a return on that investment. So there's only an upside, and you should just give it a go.
That's great. Thank you so much. Tomorrow we'll be back at 11 a.m. Central Time, and we're moving into interpretation speeches. So if you've always wanted to know how to act out a story, tomorrow is your day. Please join us at 11 a.m. Central Time, and we will see you then. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.